start our program. Tomorrow, September 5th, the Teachers' Day celebrations. We are actually at CEIR, we are planning a big program. The entire month, we are actually celebrating as Teachers Empowerment Month. And tomorrow we have a speaker also. He's a renowned speaker, a motivational speaker, and he talk the teachers, the nation builders on that topic. And tomorrow we are also having a big award function. This is called CEIR Mark of Excellence. And this is actually an award purely on merit basis. So I request all the participants to be there. A small video of that. Dear participants, please join tomorrow the same time. You can use the same Zoom ID, and a lot of announcements are coming up which will help the schools, teachers and the students. Tomorrow we will elaborate all that. Now I invite our academic head, General Convener, Academic, Madam Manila, to start the program. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Sishan sir. Good evening and warm welcome to all of you. The guest speaker of today, Dr Rishikesh sir, all the board of directors, members, and all the participants. Tomorrow being a Teachers' Day, we are going to celebrate tomorrow's day today with this particular workshop, which will motivate many of us to be the eminent or the motivational speakers, I think, to continue in our life. As teachers, we do our speakers, and we can definitely engage. When we can engage our children, I think we can definitely engage a large crowd as well. And we are going to learn a lot from Rishikesh sir today. And keeping this in mind, let us invoke God's choices blessing on each one of us through prayer, followed by a small brief about CEIR.
Center for Educational Initiatives and Research, CEIR Global Trust, was started in 2009 with a vision to facilitate the evolution of positive and progressive schools through a passionate community of practice and emerge as the most trusted organization for educators across India and Indian schools globally. Its mission is to improve the overall K-12 school culture and performance by empowering all stakeholders using latest research and practices in education. CEIR has conducted many extraordinary programs for the target groups right from K1 to K12. The ultimate aim of CEIR is to create a CEIR Center of Excellence by 2030. A perfect home away from home to hold its members. eminent, passion-driven educationists from India and abroad form the reconstituted core group of the CEIR. The management committee members, general conveners, zonal directors, and premium members. Do you want to make a difference and create a great impact as an educator? Are you interested in giving back to your teaching profession, fraternity, and society? Well, CEIR is the platform that would not only help you to be a part of our nation building activities, but also enable you to move professionally forward with infinite possibilities. Contribute by becoming a zonal director. Visit our website www.ceirglobal.com and send your profile to secretary@ceirglobal.com. The NEP 2020 policy has reoriented our educational system. CEIR took the first step to address the shift of pedagogy through Season 1 Master Series NEP 2020. And on popular demand and request, we are going to unfold Season 2 of NEP 2020 series. While Season 1 dealt with the technicalities of NEP, Season 2 focuses on its effective implementation. So here it is, 8 Saturdays, 8 sessions, 8 speakers, 8 impactful speakers, starting from August 14th to October 2nd, 2021. The academic team behind this program are Mr. Prasad Rao, Mrs. Geeta Raj, Mrs. Rita Tanuja, and Mrs. Shana Ranjit, headed by Mrs. Manila Carvalho, with the guidance of our patron, Mrs. Vijay Mukarta.
My success is my handwriting. My success is my handwriting.
All the activities of CEIR is supported by Veda Handwriting Lab. Veda offers multiple programs backed by scientific research for students and teachers. At Veda Handwriting Lab, we say good or bad handwriting is an existing myth. There is only trained or untrained handwriting. To make it possible, Veda Handwriting Lab has developed a training device called Medical Memory Board for faster and long-lasting results among students and teachers. We have specific programs for teachers, students, and the schools.
My success is my handwriting. My success is my handwriting.
Keeping in mind the demand and also the data security reasons, CEIR programs are only accessible through our CEIR Global app. We request all the participants to follow or subscribe our social media pages on YouTube, Facebook to get regular updates of our different events. We believe that we will be a force to reckon with the near future. We believe that the best is yet to be. Vande Guru.
May I now request Dr. Deepa Chandran, who is the Joint Secretary of CEIR, and Principal Sharada Vidyalaya Cochin to welcome the gathering and introduce today's speaker to the audience. Over to you, Dr. Deepa.
Vande Guru. And it's a wonderful day because the day previous to the Teachers' Day, where we all proudly celebrate as our day. Today, when I start addressing you all for the welcome speech, I'm reminded about the Indian culture, and India's largest universities, which we have been always talking about, is Nalanda University. And the meaning of Nalanda itself is the splitting of three words, that is Na, Alam, and Da, which means no stopping of the gift of knowledge. That is what we also believe in CEIR, that is, there is no stop of gifting of knowledge. I welcome all the participants. I also welcome Dr. Rishikesh, who is the wonderful speaker who believes in no stopping of the gift of knowledge. He is Dr. Rishikesh, the associate professor at the School of Education, as a faculty of the School of Education in the Asim Premji University. He also leads the Hub of Education, Law and Policy, located at the university. His research interests are in the domains of educational policies, assessments, and teacher education. Having completed his schooling and undergraduation in Bangalore, he went to JNU, New Delhi, for his higher education, and he currently teaches in the master's programs in the Asim Premji University. And the highlighting session for today is that when he is coming to talk to us in the fourth session of our masterclass series 2, he'll be focusing on teaching learning the NEP way and he is the person who was involved in the Dr. Kasturi Rangan committee, which drafted the NEP 2020. And he has been an educational researcher also for 2 decades of this. He has spent more than a decade with Asim Premji Foundation, which allowed him to engage with the educational bureaucracy as well as the teachers across more than a dozen states in India. And over the last couple of years, education policy related issues has formed the core of Rishikesh's work. He is on various government advisory committees on issues concerning education, particularly in his domicile state Karnataka. His field activities are primarily through workshops on educational research, deliberations on issues related to teacher education, and variety of engagements on education policy discussions. This element of practice and the engagement with theory in the classroom environment gives him the balance that he strives for between theory and practice in his work. He regularly writes on the various publications on the issues and challenges related to school and higher education. I happened to read his recent article that is I think during COVID, what is happening and need to reform the assessment patterns, which will be discussing to you and he'll be addressing you. So there's no stop for the gift of knowledge given to us. May I welcome you to the CEIR platform to interact with all the participants across the country and outside the country, waiting to hear from you, sir. So it is to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deepa, for that lovely introduction. And I hope I can do some justice to all the audience here in terms of being able to share with all of you some insights, which hopefully would go a long way in we all together as educators implementing the vision that the new national education policy has for our country. So since this is a very large audience, I probably will not be able to make it as interactive as I usually like to. I always prefer to have a very interactive session, but then I think it would be almost impossible for me to keep it interactive, but still I do have a few questions. We'll use the chat box. I did see a couple of your earlier sessions where you did use the chat box to interact. So we will try that. Unfortunately, I won't be able to probably have enough time to also hear your voice while I'm presenting, but I would like to keep what I have as a presentation to the bare minimum, and hopefully we would have more of a Q&A through which I could share further. So the topic I think is part of this second series that CEIR has organized, and it is about implementation, and the topic that organizers gave me is teaching learning the NEP way. And I think, this is really the core, particularly for us, the educators, whatever else the policy is talking about, whatever other recommendations for the government that the policy is making. Finally, I think for us educators, what really matters is how is the teaching learning environment going to change from what already is there. So to begin with, let's look at the vision of the NEP, because I think it is through that we will be able to understand as to what is it that NEP is expecting from us educators. When you look at this vision, the National Education Policy envisions an education system rooted in the Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming our nation sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all. Couple of things that gets highlighted here, a system that is rooted in Indian ethos. So it is important for us to understand as to what is this Indian ethos. Unfortunately, today I may not be able to spend enough time, but I'm sure you have other sessions and even otherwise elsewhere, maybe you could spend a little time to understand what is it that we should define Indian ethos as. You know, it's something that is very, very important for us to understand and appreciate if we are saying that our education system is going to be rooted in that ethos, right? But very simply speaking, when we say India and when we are talking about our independent country, we are in the same breath talking about our Indian constitution. So when we talk about Indian ethos, in our Indian constitution, that ethos is embedded. So when we are able to appreciate the principles that our Indian constitution is based on, we would have already taken many steps to understanding and appreciating the Indian ethos. Of course, beyond that, there is a very, very long history of our Indian civilization, which we also need to appreciate and understand. And together, that would be basically giving us this whole concept of what really the Indian ethos is, in which we need to root our education system, because that really is what NEP is saying is the way forward for us. I'm going to touch upon a couple of things which probably could be illustrations towards that. The other aspect is that we need to transform our nation, and we need to make our nation into a very vibrant knowledge society. Once upon a time, it was indeed a society of that kind, and it was in pursuit of this knowledge that universities such as Nalanda, which Dr. Deepa referred to in her opening remarks, universities such as Takshashila, and many other centers of learning which were spread across the Indian subcontinent were visited by students who were seeking knowledge, right? So it was a society which was generating knowledge. Societies that are vibrant knowledge societies are those which continuously generate knowledge. They do not just rest on the knowledge that has already been generated. They do not just keep rehashing. So when you're talking about a vibrant knowledge society, we should also understand it means a society which has equipped itself, which has set in motion, which has processes where a new knowledge gets generated. And I think all of us educators would very unanimously agree on this point that over the last many centuries, the Indian society has not generated as much of knowledge as it can, right? So now NEP is talking about how is it that we ensure that there is an education system rooted in Indian ethos, which can continuously generate knowledge that our society once again would be considered as a vibrant knowledge society. But it's not just about generating knowledge. It also is about that knowledge getting generated as well as getting shared in an equitable manner. It can't be the way it is today. It can't be that only some of us who happen to be, for whatever advantages that we've had through our life, part of this 10%, 20% of the society who are able to access this knowledge, acquire further knowledge, and with that help generate new knowledge. Now that is basically creating a very elite system which will never take a society forward in a manner that societies need to grow. Because it is only when we take everybody along that is when societies truly grow. Otherwise, you will have the small elite, cream of the society, which will probably keep growing in many different ways, including in generating wealth, but not that entire society. And that, unfortunately, is the truth in India. In fact, many of us have had the opportunity to engage with students coming from diverse backgrounds, and hence we do know, different sections of the society. But otherwise, when you look out and when you look at the society, it is already divided into so many classes, and each class is only mingling with themselves. And this is particularly true for the middle class, the upper middle class, who form this elite clique and who run the society, but not really understanding what really is there beyond that small elite group. Now, this has to change. And the only way it can change is the way we go about doing education. The only way it can change is we educators ensuring that the society is looking at everybody who's part of the society. So when we talk of India as a country, that every citizen is actually there in the minds of everyone, particularly our children, who are going to go forward and make policies, continue growing a society. So this is the reason why NEP 2020 talks about these specific terms by highlighting it, that if we are to look at the future 20, 30, 40 years later and hope that our society has grown further, become better, and reach the heights that it can, then it has to be in a manner that the entire society is taken along together. And it can't be driven just by a small percentage. Now, the issue with us in India, given our population, is even if it is just 5%, 10%, we are talking millions of people, right? So it's not a small number, but that percentage is very small. It can't be 10, 20% driving the society. Yeah. So we need to look at NEP understanding this. I put out a slide here. This really is the stark image that we need to understand in terms of the context that we currently are in. The Indian society was always entrenched in our caste system, which we've been trying to get rid of. But while we are trying to get rid of the caste system, what we have fallen into is the trap of the class system, which of course is a trap that most capitalist countries fall into. It is only those capitalist countries which have a very strong welfare measure which would be able to actually overcome this inherent capitalist model's drawback. We have not been able to overcome that. So if you look at this graph, right, this is for a couple of years ago. It is not just this year's, but it remains the same even now. This is about 2 or 3 year old graph. What it shows is on the leftmost of the screen, the large bar which saying 51.5%. Now that is the share in the wealth of the country that 1% of our population has. 1%, right? So remaining 99% have the remaining 49% of the wealth. So this is the kind of division of wealth that occurs. Now, if you add, the next 4% and the next 5%, it becomes totally 10%. Add another 10%, which becomes 20%. And we all here in this audience would probably be part of that 20%. And how much of wealth together do we own? 50 plus 17 plus almost 9 plus another 9, right? So you're just left for the remaining 80% of our population. They are just having about 12 to 13% of the wealth of this country. And only the 20% of us have the entire remaining 75 to 80% of the wealth. Now that is the division that has occurred in our society. And this has happened over the last 30, 40 years. Now, with this kind of a division, we cannot dream of a very bright future for our society. So how is it that we now ensure that the generation of wealth, and here when I say wealth, I would also include knowledge. Knowledge is also wealth. How do we ensure that that wealth, which includes knowledge, is distributed equitably? And that can happen only if we are able to do it through education, ensuring that access to education is there so that then access to knowledge happens, and then through that access to wealth happens. So this is in fact, if I would have had to use a graph to explain the vision of NEP, one of that would be this particular graph. So this has to change. So by the time NEP is finished implementing in the next 10, 15 years, by the time children today in our primary school go into the society to lead the society, they should be having the skill sets to change this graph. This graph can't remain this way, because if it remains this way, we are not going to be developing our society. A few of us will get developed, will get rich, will see the best of things in the world, but that's not going to be the development of the society. NEP talks about the Indian ethos and the kind of society that we had. Now, many of you may have also seen Dr. Shashi Tharoor's various videos in which he is making this big argument as to how it was the British colonialism that really took the Indian civilization apart. And many of you may have read the couple of books that has come out over the last 2 years. Now, if all that has to get synthesized into one table, then this is one table. If you look at the top row, you have the dates there. It's in centuries almost. So it starts with 1500, that is year 1500, all the way to year 2001, just the beginning of this century, right? Now, if you look at year 1500 and if you look at India, we are almost having quarter of the world's GDP share, 24.4%. So between China and India, we had half the world's GDP share. And this was just about 500 years ago, right? In fact, if you go back even further, it gets more difficult to calculate, but then the share is even higher. So, at around 1500, it's about 25%, 24.4. 200 years later, at around 1700, it continues to be so. But after that, you see this massive drop. What's happening? What happened to our country here? Why is it that our share of the world's GDP collapsed? It's easy to just blame, some enemy. We can make the British as our enemy. We can make colonialism our enemy. We can make imperialism our enemy and say that it all happened to us because of that. But when you look inwards, we'll also see that it happened to us because we as a society were not progressing. We were not moving with time. The West got into industrial revolution, started making new things, and they went on to get that elevator, which both China, India, most of Asia missed, right? Because probably we were a bit laggard. Probably we were resting on the laurels, right? That continuous striving for excellence wasn't there. So from 24, 25, we remained there and then we just dropped off the cliff. Now, so we need to understand as to how do we ensure that this learning, Dr. Deepa again mentioned, is a continuous process. Everyone is learning. It doesn't matter that I have a PhD, I need to keep continuing to learn. It doesn't matter I become a doctor or a surgeon, I need to keep continuing to learn new ways, because every day there is innovation. Every day there is somebody who is discovering something which is even better, right? So we have to ensure that we get on to that continuous learning journey. And so when we talk about our teaching learning environment in the classroom, as educators, that is what we need to be thinking about. How do we ensure that our child 20 years later, even after acquiring all those degrees that he or she can acquire and goes to the society, is continuing to be on that learning journey? Not satisfied that I have become a software engineer, not satisfied I've become whatever I wanted to, but wanting to continue to learn, right? So that learning to learn attribute, we educators need to figure out how do we ensure that that is embedded into each of our children, right? That is really crucial. The other aspect here is, of course, to understand that China, India had this kind of a share of GDP because we were generating knowledge, new knowledge all the time. We had these huge centers of learning. We had these universities. And so, there were scholars who were completely engaged with discoveries. And so there was this ecosystem that was available for new knowledge to be generated. How do we ensure that we bring that back? That is something that is very crucial, particularly in our higher education space. And that's the reason why this national education policy talks of school education and higher education in the same breath. These are not two policies, one for school education, one for higher education. There's one policy for education because there is a continuity. If we do things that NEP says correctly in the school education space, it is only then what NEP says in higher education will happen. Otherwise, it can't happen. Because higher education has to be a space where knowledge is getting generated. Today in higher education, we keep giving the same thing. We give notes in higher education. I'm sure many of us have been unfortunate to go through this kind of a higher education system. Some of you may have been lucky, you've gone out and studied and seen what truly higher education is. But unfortunately, in most universities in our country, we almost have 1,000. And I would say it would be just about 1% of the universities which don't do this, but otherwise 99% of the 1,000 universities in a country give notes to our students today, just like how it is done in school. I mean, that is a mockery of higher education, to say the least. So this has to change. But how will you change this? If you today tell our students in higher education, create your own narrative. I've spoken about this concept. Now you write a piece, 1,000-word piece. They're unable to do it. Now, why are they unable to do it? Because all the way from the time that they came into a formal learning environment, we never got them ready for it. So there is this small group of students who went to some of these good institutions that many of you run. But what about the rest? The rest did not get that opportunity. So NEP is talking about how do we ensure that the entire country and every child in this country has access to the kind of institutions that many of you run, right? That is the reason why NEP says that private philanthropic institutions running educational courses need to be encouraged. If there is great work happening, that great work not only needs to be encouraged, but it needs to spread. So if there is a trust which is running some wonderful schools, that trust should be allowed to establish more such schools, right? So that really is what NEP is saying. So NEP has a big reform agenda in terms of governance and regulation, particularly regulation. Today, unfortunately, it has happened so that our bureaucracy tries to stifle growth. So you have the education bureaucracy, which will go and ask questions if a school is doing well. So NEP is basically saying, let's look at what is required for a society. If there are good institutions doing good work, it's not education bureaucracy's role at all to go and stop things there. It is about encouraging things there, right? That's the reason why there is the separation of powers that NEP brings in very strongly, saying education bureaucracy should be largely bothered about the public school system, because however large a private group is, it cannot supplement, or it cannot be an alternative for a public education system. So NEP says that it should be a strong public education system which should learn from the vibrant private education system, and together is how we can build this future for our Indian society. Okay, first chat box question. So let me see as to how quickly can I get this answer. What is this? In one word, if we are to answer by looking at this particular triangle. Anybody in there? Okay, thank you, Sandhya ma'am. Fastest finger first, Pythagoras and Pythagoras theorem, right? So the square on the hypotenuse is the sum of the squares on the other two sides of this triangle, right angled triangle. And all of us immediately would say it's a Pythagoras theorem. But I don't know how many of us would know that Pythagoras didn't write anything during the many years that he lived in the 6th century BC. There's, of course, lots of research in terms of why did it finally get associated with Pythagoras. But Pythagoras was a philosopher who spoke about religious rituals, who spoke about the eternal soul, who spoke about reincarnation, and not really as much of the kind of math that we associate Pythagoras with. So there is a lot of history to this as well, right? One of the things that NEP says is that if we are going to be doing education, we have to do it in an integrated way. Many of us would be able to associate this with Pythagoras, but very few of us would be able to actually even recollect as to what is the time period in which Pythagoras existed. And also the fact that Pythagoras did not even, let's say, theorize this, right? So this integration of subjects is something that NEP talks about very deeply. And that is something that we educators need to figure out for each of the subjects that we teach as to how do we ensure that there is integration of subjects. I'll come to a few of that. Let's see how much of time I'll have. One is knowing some of these philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers from the rest of the world. And many of us know it because that's what we've studied, and our curriculum continues to be so that students have to be also taught that, and hence we continue to remember some of this. How many of us would be able to associate this statement that I have here in the slide to anybody, any philosopher from the past or any mathematician? A fortune subtracted from zero is a debt, and a debt subtracted from zero is a fortune. Whom do you think you can associate this with? Again, fastest fingers first, just to keep you all active in this post-lunch period. When now, sorry, Pragya madam, not Sri Ramanujam. Anyone else? Not Confucius. Jaya madam's taking a guess. No, this is not theory from Confucius. Yeah, I did see a right answer there. Kavya madam said Brahmagupta. So, so Brahmagupta, it is indeed. This particular aspect is something which is so crucial. But then, see how long it took for us to even get to Brahmagupta. Because basically we have completely lost touch in terms of, what have been these developments within the Indian society. What has been this knowledge creation effort that happened in the past, which actually took our society, our civilization to those great heights, right? We need to have pride in that. Our children need to have pride in that. See, unless we have pride in our roots, we will not be able to do much in terms of, ensuring that our society reaches those heights wherein, we excel in everything that we take up. So it needs to come back. It needs to be brought even into the curriculum. Why shouldn't any child in India know about Brahmagupta, know about Bhaskara, know about Veeramira? So these are just small chapters, or not even chapters, they're just small paragraphs in history textbooks. Now, when there is solid mathematical concepts, right, which have been established by many of these great minds, particularly, minds that have been part of our civilization, each and every one of us should know it, just the way we know Pythagoras, even though Pythagoras never did anything about the theorem, just the way we know about Confucius philosophy, just the way we know about Newton's and, Einstein's and their discoveries. We should know also about us, not through just history books, but in fact, by understanding as to what is it that they were trying to give the world, right? So this, when Europe was rejecting negative numbers, right, till almost the Middle Ages, we had civilizations around the world, not just Indian civilizations, most other civilizations from the ancient times, appreciating the use and the utility of negative numbers, right? So Brahmagupta did speak about, debt and, he basically said that the product of debt and a fortune, product of a debt and a fortune is a debt. So this is basically negative, and negative is positive, right? Minus into minus plus. So now this is something that Brahmagupta spoke about. And so around what period did Brahmagupta live? Again, most of us will not be able to get this answer, right? Because it was almost 1900, 2000 years ago that we are referring to, and we are speaking about Brahmagupta almost in the 1st century of the Christian era. So these are things that we need to appreciate and understand, and we need to ensure that while we are getting into our teaching learning environment, our children as well appreciate this. We all may be very familiar with Gottfried Leibniz and Isaac Newton's this big fight, as they say, with regard to the calculus, right, as to who invented. But very few of us would know that 500 years before them, right, Leibniz and Newton fighting in the 1700s, but in the 1100s, 1200s, you had Bhaskara who had pretty much said the same thing. Why aren't we aware of it? Why aren't our children engaging with what Bhaskara was trying to do? And why only with what Leibniz did and what Newton did? Not that, that's not important, because they obviously refined things that probably had happened earlier. And, today what we know is exactly the way probably what Leibniz did put out. But that doesn't mean that you don't, look back and appreciate what had happened there, because these are all different ways in which we build pride, in our children to the society that they belong to. So that tomorrow it's not that, as soon as you finish school, you go to a university outside, or as soon as you finish university, you want to go and work somewhere outside. But then children also feel that connectedness and saying that, well, yes, I want to stay back and I want to contribute to my society as well. And through that, let me contribute to the global society, right? So the building this pride for NEP is a very big thing. And in fact, that is the reason. And in fact, some of these principles in NEP are manifesting in different kinds of provisions. One is, of course, this whole idea of in the curriculum that we need to bring in a lot more. Now, this doesn't mean that you bring in everything and anything which doesn't even have scientific proof, right? So that really is where you need to be very cautious, because as you go back into the past, we can even start taking mythology into history and start creating, wherein we have very little evidence as something that has been founded and something that has been established. So this we'll have to be cautious about. So we need to be very cautious about exaggerations, right? We have exaggerations to the extent that we had flying machines in the ancient past. Now, so how do you draw that line? How do you ensure that you do talk about these great minds in the past, but at the same time, you don't exaggerate? And that is basically by ensuring that you use all this in history. And you then equip our children to understand as to how do you differentiate between history and mythology, right? We do a little bit in history. I think those of you who are here who deal with social studies, between history and prehistory, we kind of try to make our children, get an understanding of the difference. But that distinction also needs to be on those things from the past which has evidence, which do not have evidence, which has good evidence, which does not have good enough evidence, right? This comes from history. The only reason history is mandatory, even today, when at the click of a button on your phone, you can get probably any historical fact, right, from anywhere. But why do we still ensure, and why does anywhere around the world history is a mandatory subject, is because there are some of these life skills which through history lessons our children are able to grasp. And one of them, for instance, is triangulation of data. Just because somebody gives me one fact, I can't blindly say, yes, that is the truth. I need to ask for verification. I need to see whether there is any other data corresponding to it. That's the reason we talk about wars and we say like, well, we don't know who won. And we talk about as to how a court poet spoke about this king having won the war, wherein a foreign traveler said something else, or another court poet said something else, which is basically telling the children that, truth is not easy in that sense to find. You will have to keep looking, you'll have to keep matching. And today what we know as truth may change a little tomorrow with new evidence, with, new evidence that could be a different perspective. So this idea, this is the new teaching learning. Not about what is there in the textbook is like what is there in the Bible, in the Gita, in the Quran, that you can't really question that. Textbooks have to be questioned, right? Because if a child asks a question on the textbook, I've seen many teachers saying that, well, it's in the textbook, don't ask any more questions, right? Well, moment a child asks a question, that is when you should feel as a teacher that you are successful, that a child is even questioning the textbook, so tomorrow it can question many other things. And that is really when the mind has started to really perform at its optimum best. So how do we ensure as educators teaching learning happening in this manner, in an integrated way, wherein math and history speak to each other, music and math speak to each other, right? Biology and physics speak to each other. And then all this integrated way in which we are able to ensure that the teaching learning environment happens. Now it's easier said than done, I know. Like, how do I as a history teacher try and get a little bit of maths to make my history exciting? Not very easy. I need to probably sit with my colleague teacher who is the math exponent and spend some time. So I need that time then, other than preparing or rather doing my class teaching, I need my time to prepare my lesson. And if it's an integrated one, I need some time to prepare it with my colleague who is from another discipline. Now, NEP hence talks about doing this with the teachers, allowing this autonomy, this flexibility, this time for the teacher, rather than overloading the teacher with syllabus, which has to be completed, and because of which teacher has no time, forget for herself, no time to even allow children to walk through the path of discovery, which is very, very essential. So there are these large changes that are expected, are supposed to come, and which is what NEP is saying should be done. And that is why NEP says you can't bring these changes just by tweaking a few things here and there. You can't bring a teaching learning environment change just by changing the curriculum. You have to allow teachers the flexibility and the autonomy. You have to bring in, of course, a new curriculum, but then teacher is really crucial. How do you ensure there is more time for the teacher? So you have to reduce the syllabus. The content load has to come down because the focus has to be on the concept and the focus has to be on the process, the pedagogy. So the content has to be reduced. Now, what content do you reduce? It's not easy, right? But then that's really where one is going to break their heads in terms of when we redesign the curriculum, what is the content that can stay aside as an annexure, can be taken up by the child, by herself, by her parents, through something else. But what is it that you focus on in the classroom so that the teacher has more time and space for other things as well, right? Similarly, preparing the teacher is another important area for NEP, saying that if all this has to be done, teachers will also need to professionally continue to develop, right? By their own choice, not by somebody dictating something that the teacher has to do, but the teacher feeling the need for a development and being able to have that access to that kind of a professional development. So, this on one hand. On the other hand, managements, the bureaucracy, they allowing for that to happen, and hence ensuring that everything that the management does, education bureaucracy does, is supporting what the teacher is expected to do, right? Today, I mean, those of you who probably work in the public education system know that when the education bureaucracy representatives come, the only thing that most of them are concerned about is whether the teacher has the lesson plan. They're not bothered about the exciting thing that is happening in the classroom. Even if there is some fabulous experiment that is happening, rather than appreciating the teacher on that day for that and go away, they would still ask as to whether what experiment was happening in the class is already there in the lesson plan or not. Doesn't the teacher have the flexibility even for that much, that a child or a group of children have got inquisitive and putting aside the lesson plan, the teacher has gone about doing that experiment because that is where the curiosity was. The teachers have to be provided that autonomy, right? And so NEP envisions a platform, a learning environment, an ecosystem wherein all this is in place. Let's see whether we can answer some of these questions. Going back to the chat box. When we are looking at percentage of 10-year-olds able to read a text at grade 2 level across the country, Yeah, Sheetal ma'am is saying 20%. Well, it's a little more than what each one of you is saying. Yeah. Okay, so around the 40 mark. Well, 80% is way beyond. So half the children in our rural schools, both private and public, not just the government schools, right? When you take the rural schools, both private and public, about half the number of children in class 5 are able to read class 2. And when we all know, when we say class 2, it's just a very, very simple text, right? Only half the number of children in our country are able to do it. In many of your schools, maybe almost all children. But then if you put all the 250 million children together, 125 million children after 5 years of schooling cannot read in our country. We can't think of a future for our country if we continue to stare at these numbers, which we have been now staring for many, many decades. This has to change. And many things have to happen. I'm not going to go into that, but the policy is very, very concerned about this. And of course, I think in your previous session, the resource person, madam, spoke about Nipun, which is in fact an initiative to ensure that this changes. Ensure that children are able to read. And of course, when we say read, it comes automatically that it is about reading with comprehension, reading with understanding, not just reading, which of course many children do. They just read. They're able to read. They're able to decode, but nothing else happens in terms of the cognitive process. Okay. India's rank in this international assessment. It's an international student assessment that happens every year in the OECD countries, right? India participated about 12 years ago. Yes, Aditi ma'am, thanks for that. 72 was India's rank, but out of, yeah, Jaya ma'am is saying third last. So 72 out of 74 countries was our ranking in PISA, right? And who participated in our country? 15-year-olds from two of our best states in terms of our education indicators. Himachal Pradesh in North India, Tamil Nadu in South India provide or give us the best data, right? In terms of 10th standard. So 10th standard students across the state, across all schools. So this was not school-based, this was state-based. 15-year-olds in Tamil Nadu studying or enrolled in 10th standard, 15-year-olds in Himachal Pradesh enrolled in 10th standard, participated in this international assessment, and we got ranked 72 out of 74. It is a proxy. Let's not bother about rank. It's a proxy to where we stand vis-a-vis other 15-year-olds in the world, and hence it's a proxy as to where do we stand in terms of our competitive edge, right? We got away from that kind of a result saying that those question papers were out of syllabus. That was the most ridiculous remark that anybody could make, because PISA is an assessment which assesses the kinds of skill sets that 15-year-old human beings are supposed to have, irrespective of where they are, as long as they are on planet Earth. So if we are doing a good job, and if for out of those 15 years, even for 10 years, these children have been part of an education system, they have to be doing well. What we saw was they were not doing well, and we gave an excuse saying that those questions that were there in the PISA assessment were out of context. We should stop giving excuses. So the thing for us is to really see as to what is it that 15-year-olds in other countries are able to do, which our children are not able to do. And hence, what is it that we wish we should do from grade 1 or from pre-primary, that by the time that they're in grade 10, they're able to actually do what other children in other countries are able to do, because that is when we can also aspire to be a developed country, to be a mature society, to be a progressive civilization. If we keep giving excuses, we will remain where we are, and worse, we could probably fall off from where we are as well. Okay. Let's see whether you can guess this. 100 children enrolling in class 1. How many do you think today? Okay, today when I say, I mean, with COVID, the numbers have become a little more worse over the last 2 years, but let's say 2019, before pre-COVID. How many children out of 100 do you think reach class 10? Sharon ma'am saying 45, 80, 90, 50. There's too many fastest fingers first. There are many people going in there. Okay, 67, 75, 82. Okay, somebody almost got pretty much the right number there. Yes, so nobody is saying 100 here, and that's good, right? It's not as bad as some of you are trying to put that 40%, 50%. 20 years ago, we were at that number. 20 years ago in 2001, when you look at the data, and we are talking about official data. There is always a question mark on official data saying things are actually far worse. But as per official data, 20 years ago, if 100 children joined class 1, only 40 were there in class 10. Okay, today things have improved. Things have definitely improved across the country. In some places, it has improved far more than in some others. Some states have done much better. But on an average, about 80%. So out of 100, about 80 children reach class 10. 20 don't. But exact average is 78. So 22 children do not. So 22 children out of every 100. And remember, we have 250 million children. You can imagine the millions of children who even today are unable to complete their school education. Many reasons could be there, but one of the reasons is the kind of education system that we have. The education system that keeps putting this question mark on this human brain, which is actually programmed to learn. How is it that a human brain, which is programmed to learn, by birth it is programmed to learn? How is it that we tell this human brain that it cannot learn basic concepts at the school level and hence is unable to complete grade 10? Up to grade 10, we all agree it's the basic concepts. Every child or any human being should be able to get that. How is it that 22%, so millions of children in our country, we fail them somewhere in between, saying that they are not able to learn? This can't be the education system that we take and say that we will move forward and make our country great, make our society, something to look up to. So we will really have to figure out what is it that we are doing in school that 22% are unable to finish 10th standard. And what is that number in class 12? Some of you earlier spoke about, gave me percentages for 10th standard. That is applicable there. Less than 50% reach class 12. So after 10, 80% reach 10, but out of that many fail 10. And then finally, by the time we have our 18-year-olds, 17, 18-year-olds ready to graduate school, only 50%. So out of 100, if there were 100 children along with, somebody now who's 10 years ago who was, or 12 years ago who was in grade 1, only 50 have come along with that child. The remaining 50 are out of schooling system. And we can only imagine what kinds of roles our society would give for these children who are not even able to finish school. What kinds of roles would our society give, right? And given that our schooling system anyways does not equip children with life skills as much as it should, that is the other change NEP is saying, because NEP is saying it is okay if you stop after your school to get into work. It is okay. That is how the developed society functions. After school, there are many, many children who have now become adults who stop studying formal education and get into work after their 12th. They earn some money and then they look for colleges which they can enroll into. That's fine. But then they are equipped with the skills that they can actually go and do many different kinds of roles, which our children we are not equipping with, because the only thing that we equip our children with is either to go and do higher education or go and repair something in a mechanic shop, right? Which is again also something that we do not equip them with. It is something that they learn by themselves. Now, this is, completely unacceptable in a democratic society. And in a democratic society which has mandatory child rights, this is completely unacceptable. So NEP basically talks about how do you ensure that this does not continue, right? Yeah, Anuradha madam is saying, how can the situation be minimized? So NEP is all about this, ma'am. I don't know how much of time we will have today, but then every provision you need to think about, these are the questions that NEP is addressing. That is the reason why the changes are being spoken of. That is the reason why a curricular revision is being spoken of. And so there are many things which we today may not be able to, get into, but that's what NEP is addressing or attempting to address. Earlier, I did see Preeti madam, if I recollect the name correctly, was saying, well, our children will read well in their mother tongue. Sorry, ma'am, that's not true either. If we say 50% of children in class 5 are not able to read, they're not able to read in their own mother tongue also. It's not that they are given a foreign language or they're given English, which is not part of their lifestyle. It is in their own mother tongue, they're not able to read, right? Because their mother tongue anyways, we don't teach, unfortunately. That is another change NEP is talking about, right? The easiest language for them to learn is the one we ask them to stop learning as soon as they enter school. How do you change that? That's the other thing that we need to focus on. And that is really where multilingualism as a concept comes. And that is where we as educators who have been brought up with this monolingualism, throughout, those of us who are all above 40 have all come out with this system of monolingualism, wherein if you are to learn very well, you have to learn one language, you have to learn only in that language, then you will do very well in that language and you will do very well in your studies, was the theory. That theory has been bunked, completely debunked, because today all research, all neuroscience research says the more number of languages the human brain is exposed to, the better is the cognitive process. So it's not just that you will learn more languages. That's not the only positive. Yes, you will acquire many languages, which in itself is advantageous. But the more number of languages a child is exposed to, the better is the cognitive process. The better are the connections that the brain is making. The synapses are getting formed even in a far more better way than a child who's exposed to only one language. So tables have turned from the time, the theories were established 40, 50, 60 years ago for many of us who got our education to what is now. It's completely turned. And this is with research, with technology coming in, we being able to understand our brains even better. What is fascinating is, for us in India, all that the research is saying, and many of this research happening in the Western world, all that the research is saying, we have a ready-made template. If the research in the Western world is saying that more the number of languages, the better it is for a child, we are in that ecosystem. I mean, our country is filled with languages, but unfortunately we were, ensuring that the children didn't bring any language into the classroom except the one that was the medium of instruction, which was not just harming the child, which basically harmed our society, right? Our progress. Okay, many numbers have come there. 30% says Saroj ma'am, 30 to 40. Shaila ma'am, 40%. Well, this is the question, 54% Saranya ma'am. I'm talking about percentage of youth in our country doing higher education. So gross enrollment ratio, which is between 18 years to 23 years, an individual has to be enrolled in a college, right? That's the college going year, 18 to 23. What percentage of 18 to 23-year-olds in our country is enrolled in any higher education institution? It could be professional, like teacher education, medical, engineering, whatever, law. It could be a regular degree program like BA, BSc, whatever. So the numbers you are giving me, way off. Last year's data is 26.7. The last data that we have, this last year's data, of course, has come 1 year before that. 26.7. Only quarter of our youth enroll in higher education institutions. Only quarter. 75% after your school, 75% are not coming into higher education. 75%. Where are they going? What are they doing? Have we done enough with them that wherever they're going, they're able to use what they've done in school? because unfortunately our schooling system is such that we keep preparing them for a higher education institution, wherein 75% of them don't even enroll for that. They're not even ready. They don't want to do it now. So what is our school system? Does our school system know about this? Do we educators know that we have to give them the skill sets that they're, because many of them or majority of them, 75% of them are actually wanting to go out there and do something else, work, try out something. Yeah, only 26%. Some states, like how, for instance, class 12, I said, class 12, 44% reach class 12. But some states like Himachal Pradesh, that 44%, which is national average, Himachal Pradesh, it is 74%, right? Jharkhand, it is 29%. Average is 44% who finish 12th standard, but Himachal Pradesh 75% finished, Jharkhand 29% finished, right? So averages are also misleading, but then it gives a broad idea as to where we stand nationally. Similarly, percentage of youth, national average is 26%, 26 odd, right? But Tamil Nadu, 50% of the youth join. Tamil Nadu is among the higher percentages, right? But go to some other state, it's not even 26%, it is 10%. Yeah. So these are the things that we have to think about. So when we're talking about teaching, learning, what is it that we need to do? These figures also are supposed to respond to that, decide as to what should be our new curricular framework. Through that, what is it that then we are going to enable our children to do? And hence NEP addresses this. It hence addresses this also in the higher education space, because the NEP goal is that by 2030, will enroll in our higher education. Even after 15 years, it's 50%, because no society at any given point of days, 100% of children who finish school have to be studying in higher education. Not necessary. Because remember, higher education is knowledge generation. Yes, it gives then that individual some extra advantage, but it's not that only through higher education you need to get good employment. You should be able to get decent enough employment even after school, right? And not just some informal sector. In a formal sector, a decent enough employment even after school. That should be the strength of our school program. And many of our, for instance, many of you who run your IB programs, after 12, those children are ready to do anything. In fact, ideally after 12, those children should go and intern somewhere for 1 or 2 years, and then they should be getting into a higher education program of their choice, because that is when they will excel. That is when they will be able to go and actually create magic with, with that higher education environment, and create these discoveries and give us all this new knowledge that we crave from our children. Okay, so this 26% average, is something that we should also keep in mind, and 50% is the NEP vision in terms of in the next 10-15 years. I am just trying to see as to what is the time. How much time would I have? Sorry, Dr. Sreesan, you are
sorry, you
muted.
can take 10 minutes more. Sir.
10 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay. So in higher education, yes, there is this entry exit. Ma'am spoke about the gap year. Gap year is after 12th, you can have a gap year. But in higher education, you have entry every year, right? You can enroll first year, leave after first year, go work, or if you had some family problem, solve that, come back. When an individual comes back in the second year, they don't have to, like today, start from first year again. They can continue with second year. And that is why UGC last month released the academic bank of credits, right? So every course that you finish, you acquire credits. And it is based on that credits that you finally finish your degree. And so you can finish 1 year, leave, work for 2 years, come back, do your second year, leave, work for 1 year, come back. So that exit entry option is given also to ensure that we have better enrollment, because otherwise the many children, many youth who join our higher education programs would also finally drop off because they're not able to sustain 3 years, 4 years continuing to work when families are struggling. Not easy for everyone. Now that credit-based program is also something that's going to happen in our secondary education. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th is going to undergo a huge transformation. They are going to become 8 semesters and they're going to be credit-based. So children are going to acquire credits based on the courses that they take, and it's based on those credits that they will get the school leaving certificate. After that, they may wish to do an ICSE exam, a CBSE exam, or any state board exam or anything else. But then all that they need for a school leaving certificate once NEP is completely implemented is just the number of credits that would be ascertained as enough for getting a school leaving certificate. Of course, these are going to take, I mean, in the school education space, it's going to take a little more time. Maybe I'm looking at another 7, 8 years for this change to happen if things go as, you know, as it should. You know, to basically address those issues, someone asked as to how do we minimize that? One big thing is reading. And I'm putting this slide up front here because we are all, you know, educators concerned with school. We do very little of reading. Research from around the world says, by psychologists, by neuroscientists today, that reading, the advantages that reading provides is almost immeasurable. Huge advantages. How do we ensure that our children become lifelong readers, right? So that has to become part of any of our program, particularly at the primary level and the pre-primary level, right? So reading and development of IQ, there is a very, very symbiotic relationship. This again is research, right? So the more children read, the better is their intelligence because of the cognitive process that is taking place. So how do you ensure that this reading happens? And this reading is the one that reading with understanding, right? It's not just the way many of our children read. They just read without even, forget understanding. They don't even pause for comma. They don't even, you know, have those simple reading skills, many of our children, unfortunately. But then this reading is very, very critical, and developing this reading skill, providing children this opportunity to read, reading by themselves, right? And that's the reason why libraries are so crucial. Children's literature in our country, we have very, very few numbers in terms of children's literature, which is age appropriate, right? If you look at the Western world, and those of you who are into language, literacy and language, I'm sure you would have seen, there's just so much of literature available for different age groups, all the way from 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds to 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. You know, the kind of literature that is available, we have very little. Today, we have a Tulika, you know, or someone else publishing translated works, but again, you know, very, very little. And not really of the kind of quality that you get to see outside. So how do we generate this material? That's very, very important for our society. And NEP talks about generating lots and lots of material, children's literature in different languages, right? So a lot of translation work will also be required. So, you know, huge work on that front, which is pending. I'm not going to go into this reading related thing. Maybe, you know, you could also look at someone else for this perspective. There are different kinds of intelligences: crystallized intelligence, fluid intelligence, emotional intelligence, you know, broad categories within that, many kinds, which come from reading. And reading is something that you initiate a child, you know, as soon as the child comes in, right? And even before you get into writing. So first is, of course, oral speaking and things. And then, of course, very soon, you know, into reading. And that is a huge foundation, which our education system, in fact, completely misses out. It misses out because because of a penchant for writing and getting them to start writing even before, in fact, many children, poor things, are forced to write even before their, you know, hand muscles have developed enough to hold a pencil. That is the, you know, tragedy of our pre-primary. So that is the reason NEP talks about how the pre-primary ecosystem has to completely, you know, undergo let's say you know, it's almost like pre-primary undergoing a paradigm shift. Because today, unfortunately, we see pre-primary children in uniform with a finger on the lip sitting and listening to a teacher. I mean, that's That's an age when you don't sit and listen to a teacher. A teacher is supposed to play with you, and together you're supposed to, learn things and enjoy learning. Poor things, after 3 years of preschool, they don't want to start school only. That's what we do with them when they come to preschool. So NEP basically talks about how do you change this? How do you ensure that children get excited about learning when they come into a formal learning environment, not get scared about learning, which is, what many of our children go through. I'm going to just share this one slide and then we'll close. So NEP, when it talks about teaching learning, the biggest thing that it talks about is integrated curriculum. Learning, because in our brain, learning doesn't happen in those silos, right? Disciplines, subjects, chapters. In our brain, everything is getting, done together. So how do we do that? Of course, it can't be that every teacher, we can't take the Scandinavian model, wherein if you take some of these rich countries, let's say Finland, now you have one teacher who will be able to teach all subjects even at grade 10, right? Because that's the kind of teacher preparedness, teacher qualification, pre-teacher qualification, all that they have. No, we are not there. And for us to get there, probably another 20, 30 years, which is why there's reform in teacher education also that NEP talks about. But let's not go there. Given our situation now, wherein we all have our own expertise in our disciplines, how do we integrate? That is something that we will have to probably work and figure out. Even though I may be a maths teacher, how do I bring in some of the humanities into my math? That's somewhere that we need to work, because the curriculum and pedagogy transformation is NEP's focus. And it says from 2022 onwards, straight away, we will have to start bringing about these changes. So building language proficiency, scientific temper, which almost every policy of ours is talking about, but then we talk about scientific temper only related to science subject. But scientific temper, in fact, the maximum amount of scientific temper you can bring is through history, wherein you are teaching a child to figure out what is a good evidence, what is a poor evidence, right? And that is really where scientific temper is coming, because then the child will not blindly follow a Baba, right? And the child will question the Baba also, saying that how is this happening? So these aspects, these attributes, the curricular framework which is going to come now is going to be addressing. And in this, couple of things that we do see is the sense of aesthetics. I did see this advertisement on Veda handwriting in your platform. See, handwriting, why is handwriting important? It's not about a beautiful handwriting, easy for us to read, and teachers can mark the question paper easily. Handwriting is aesthetics, and aesthetics is very important. It has a direct connect to what's happening in our brain, right? So developing a child's handwriting into a beautiful handwriting, what I saw as to what Veda is doing. Now that is something which is also enabling the sense of aesthetics in a child. So we may tomorrow go into a world wherein everybody is only typing on the computer keyboard, but still what we do with handwriting is not just about just writing that, it's about building that sense of aesthetics, right? So similarly, the other aspect, knowledge of India, something our children, particularly in the private schools and our middle class, upper middle class families with IB boards, they're completely losing that connect to what really India is, what it has to offer. How many UNESCO heritage sites do we have in our country? Amongst the world's largest, right? But no, they would know about Pisa in Italy, right? They would know about the Stonehenges, they would know about everything else, but they wouldn't even know the number of UNESCO heritage sites in their own state. So these are things that NEP is saying that we should be bringing into our curriculum very strongly. Textbooks of high quality, which again is not looked at as the only source, but then one of it. Along with integrated curriculum, flexible curriculum, and a huge change in assessment. These two are the other big things, because NEP says without these two coming in, the other changes will not fall into place. So when you say integrated curriculum, basically you're talking about equal emphasis to all subjects. Exams are coming, so I'm not going to do PHE. Exams are going to come, so music class is substituted by math class. Now that's not the way education has to happen, right? So integrated curriculum wherein there is no hierarchy of subjects and all subjects are given equal importance, because in the secondary education, when we are talking about credits, you can earn your credits even from music, you can earn your credits from sports also, right? And that is how you finally finish your school. with credits in all the baskets. Yeah. So no hard separation between curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, whatever we call it. An integration of the occasional subjects. One thing which was happening in the past, which very rarely happens today, unless of course some of you may already have those labs in your schools. But many of us who grew up in the 70s, up to the 70s, 80s, we had something in the school every, week, at least 2-3 times, which had nothing to do with the textbook, right? For instance, I remember we always were taken into the carpentry room, and twice every week we did carpentry. And what research says is basically it's not about I finally becoming very good in carpentry or becoming a good carpenter. Yes, maybe that also I will get some excitement about something like that, carpentry or plumbing, but also as to what this hands-on thing, as you shave off the wood, what is it doing in your mind? What are the different layers that you're getting as you shave the wood off a log? These are all very, very critical for our overall cognitive development. And so integrating vocational education in that way is what NEP talks about. Not about streaming, not saying somebody is not good in a particular subject and hence he will only do occasional so that at least later on he'll become something. No, that's not the idea. The idea is that everyone benefits from these occasional pursuits. So flexible curriculum, the choice for students, the reduction in the curriculum load, the emphasis on, because if you are saying that there will be 40 subjects in high school, you can't have each subject the way we have today. It will have to be reduced to the core concepts, the core ideas, and that is when a child probably will be able to then look at choosing 40 subjects from, let's say, about 120 different subjects. Calling it subjects is problem. It's not really subject because they're all within the various disciplines. These are courses, right? That's what a child would be doing. The child would be taking up these courses every. So this experiential learning is something which is very much emphasized. So there has to be lots of project-based assessments. Assessments can't be only paper pencil. It will also have to be a 360-degree assessment, and hence the report card is also reporting on all these things. On a variety of assessments that would have happened with the child through the year. Of course, IB, ICGS, IGCSE, they do already give you certain framework. So it is on similar lines that PARAK is also speaking of. So PARAK is, of course, the acronym for Performance Assessment Review Analysis of Knowledge for Holistic Development. This is what NCERT is bringing in as this new assessment framework. It is similar to what we see in the international curriculum. So yeah, I directly didn't go into any specific teaching learning as such, but broadly put out as to what all is there for us to be thinking about. If we are to think about what does it mean for teaching learning in a new way for the new national education policy. So I'll pause here, or rather I will stop here. I've been speaking for so long. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was really a wonderful session where I think to sum up, people are there with some questions. Anyone is having any questions in the chat box or to ask him? You have specially touched on integration of subjects through Pythagoras theorem you have introduced, and you have made us on this day to made us think that children should understand what we are trying to give the world by Indian civilization, and then cautious about exaggerations happening, and textbooks also to be questioned so that the children start questioning, and inquisitiveness develops among the children, and exposing to more languages, skills to be given more importance, crystallized intelligence, fluid intelligence, and emotional integrations, and integrated curriculum all was touched wonderfully by you. I think anyone has.
Sorry. Madam Anuradha Chandrasekhar want to ask. She has raised. Ma'am, you can ask.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Kindly excuse me, my video mode is not working.
No problem. No, proceed.
But it gets muted. Good evening, sir. Anuradha Chandrasekhar. Just a very, I don't know whether it's silly or an, question which should be thought about. Our Indian schools infrastructure and NEP 2020, how are they related, sir? Because our infrastructure.
Okay, I'll answer this very quickly, ma'am. I'll
Thank
answer
you,
this
sir.
very quickly. See, I
Okay.
think when you speak of infrastructure, particularly, we are concerned about the rural government school infrastructure, which we all know is in a poor state of affairs. See, if you look at a state like Karnataka, where I come from, the government has directly owns 45,000 schools, 45,000 schools.
Yeah.
Almost 5,000 schools in Karnataka have less than 10 children.
Okay.
Across the 5 grades, sometimes even 7 grades.
Oh,
There are
lovely, sir.
5,000 schools which have less than 10 children. Now, even the richest government in this world will not be able to resource an ecosystem of this kind, right? So for 10 children, how many teachers can a government give? If these 10 children are spread across 5 classes, there is no government in the world which can give for 10 children 5 teachers, even if you say 1 teacher per class, right? So it has become completely unviable in terms of the kind of ecosystem that we have. The reason why it happened like this is because we wanted access. 20 years ago, there were many children who could not go to school because there was no school. So that is the reason why through Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we said every village should have a school, and we built those schools. So we got that access. And that time it was very important because from one village to another village also access was difficult. If you looked at Chamarajanagar district in Karnataka, if you went to Badmer in Rajasthan, or if you went to Uttarkashi in Uttarakhand and saw, children can't go from one village to another village. But today, even that access has improved. So there's a time that has come, and that is why NEP is saying that we should look at school complexes. Every panchayat having a large school, like many of your private schools, from pre-primary to 12th standard, which can have about 3,000 children, right? Every panchayat should have that kind of a school. So the 10 villages of one gram panchayat can have all the children come there. Now, for very young children, pre-primary, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old child, or even a 6-7-year-old child may not be able to walk even to the next village or go to the next village. That is the reason why NEP says don't shut down the existing schools. So if 45,000 schools are there, 10,000 schools can be the school complexes. But the remaining 35,000 schools can become foundational schools. That's the reason why also you have that different structure. 5 years foundational stage, 3 years preparatory stage, 3 years middle school, and 4 years secondary stage, right? You have these 4 structures in the NEP. It is aligned with the developmental philosophy as well, how a child's mind develops. But it is also to do with this pragmatic issue, saying that each of these village schools can become a foundational stage school. So a child from grade 5 to grade 8 study there. They study in different languages. There is not really much of a structure. It's all about using the activity-based learning, using discovery-based approaches, experiential learning. Those would be the foundational stage. So if you are to village school today becomes a foundational school, which is like a very vibrant pre-primary plus grade 1, grade 2. And then you have this big school where everybody else then goes to after the foundational stage. Yeah. So that is the only way where we can resource our schools very well. So then what will happen is this foundational stage school is a pre-primary school, can get all the pre-primary material. It can just have 1 or 2 teachers, that's fine. But then this big school can get all the resources, like probably some of the most well-resourced schools that some of you own or some of you teach in.
Right. I'm Dr.
So that's NEP's solution.
Let me ask one question, please. That while this policy is implemented, that we can expect a lot of demerits that we will have to change. Is there any possibility or provision in that if something happens like that? Any flexibility is there? Any fluctuation is possible? It means, I mean, the changing in the policy wherever they recur. Now, you yourself asked on that certain states, they cannot continue up to the full level. It means from the beginning to end, it would be very difficult, especially I'm talking about the state of Kerala because I'm in practice. I mean, feeling that one. That's why I'm asking this question. Because the state policy is something different. The policy, the most of the states are having much power. They are not utilizing the power properly. The kind it means a lot of indifference going on. That's why, especially the CBSE streams, that's affecting very badly. When we are implementing this policy, this national educational policy, we will find certain difficulties in certain areas. Now asking, is there any provision or chances to change when we monitor this kind of problems?
Okay. Sir, your voice was breaking. I didn't catch you fully, but I'll try to respond. You rightly said that school education in our country is a concurrent subject. The states have a lot of power. In fact, that is the reason why what NCERT has done now is it has asked all the states to prepare position papers on 25 different topics and create also a state curricular framework and send it to NCERT. What NCERT is saying is that they will take all these curricular frameworks from the different states and design a national curricular framework and send it back to the states. When it comes back to the states, just like RTE is a national law. But when it comes back to the state, then we create our own rules. So the rules, so the framework will be from the national level, from Delhi, from NCERT. But then after that, the curriculum will be, each one of us in our states would be using that framework, designing our curriculum, and from there on the syllabus, keeping the NEP spirit in mind.
Yeah. Anyhow, that's a good answer. That's what I expected. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think anyone else?
Ashwini madam has raised.
Time up, 6 o'clock.
There's one hand which has been raised for a long time, so we may just take.
Excuse me, sir.
There's one hand which has been raised for a long time.
Just take that. Please unmute Ashwini.
Just take that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ma'am, you can speak. Madam
Ashwini, ma'am Ashwini.
You have to unmute from your side. Ma'am, can you do it? Something.
He must have left now, so we can close.
I'm sorry.
I think we, yes, the chat box is bombarded with lot of, appreciations and for your session, sir. And it has been a wonderful session, and many were demanding one more sessions from you. We'll naturally call you back for one more discussion. But we would like to thank Manila madam to take an initiative to bring you to this platform of CEIR. As you have seen, the director board, Dr. Sreesan, Dr. Shahjahan, our Vijayam Karta madam, Dr. Bindu, Pramod Mahajan, Suresh sir, we all work in a team to see that, as you said, that NEP reaches to every corner. So we have master series of 1 and 2, second series where we have 8 sessions, as you have seen. So it was a wonderful insight also, and it made us think in many different ways, because many of your points have touched us, and I think these type of webinars will naturally help the educators like us to see that NEP goes to the ground level. Thank you very much, Dr. Rishikesh, and for being with us, and CEIR is very much obliged for you. We are thankful to every participant, board of directors, all the zonal directors who take the team spirit of CEIR forward. And we are trying to see that, the rich heritage of India's captions that, as on Teachers' Day, we say, a teacher have the feeling what to give more. So you are an ideal teacher before us today. So thank you, Doctor, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Happy Teachers' Day to all of you.
Happy Teachers' Day to you, sir.
We will send you a special invitation letter, sir.
You are also invited to join us tomorrow.
For tomorrow's program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Once again, Vande Guru to all participants. Please meet tomorrow the same time. Madam, ma'am, you can make your closing statement.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Rishikesh, for sharing your valuable thoughts here. It was really, thought-provoking session. We really had to really think and go back to our schools and start reinventing certain things which we were not doing. And as Deepa ma'am mentions, a lot of in the chat box.
Thank you for having me.
The messages were just pouring in, appreciating the way you explained. So thank you so much, and thanks so much for the board of members who are here, who are really a moral support. Every meeting, every session, they are there with us, which gives us a boost to continue our work in this platform. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rishan sir, for being there always. And Vijaya ma'am, thank you so much. Thank you so much, participants. We really appreciate your dedication in being part of this program every Saturday, and you all are there. And we have seen some of the participants were repeatedly seen in our platform. So thank you so much for being there, and wishing all of you a very happy Teachers' Day tomorrow. And we do have a program tomorrow at 4:30. Please join us for the awards ceremony.
You can use the same Zoom link.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that should be clear. That should be clear. Okay.
One day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.